Hi, I'm Frank O'Reilly, and I'm one of the historians at the National Park Service at the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. We are right down in the very heart of Fredericksburg, Virginia, right on the Rappahannock River. 150 years ago, this was the site of one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, and almost 18,000 people got hurt here. It's also one of the most novel battles of the Civil War. This saw things that never happened on a battlefield before. One of the most amazing is what's happening right behind me, was that soldiers literally fought house by house, block by block, street by street through the downtown of Fredericksburg. And this was the first urban combat in all of North America. The other things that are very interesting and novel about the Battle of Fredericksburg is that when the Union Army attempted to lay pontoon bridges across the Rappahannock, they were stopped by Confederate sharpshooters who held them at bay. In the course of that, the Union Army had to bombard the city, trying to drive them out, but it was unsuccessful. And then they had to put infantry in boats and literally ferry them across the river and drive those Confederates out. When they did that, they rewrote history. The men who got into those boats launched into the very first riverine crossing under fire in American military history. And when they landed on this side of the river, they established the very first beachhead under fire ever in our history. So between the idea of launching an attack in boats under fire, landing under fire, and then literally fighting through the streets of Fredericksburg, these men were rewriting history. There wasn't a single person here who had thought about it, prepared for it, practiced it. They were just making it up as they went along. It's amazing how intuitive they were. When they crossed the Rappahannock on December 11th, 1862, they actually crossed the Rubicon of experience and brought us into the modern military experience. The pontoon bridges in 1862 would have been composed of numerous boats lined up with anchors above and below stream because the Rappahannock was tidal and would shift back and forth. Then they would lay planks across them to tie the boats together and then put floorboards across them. The boats were commandeered to make the river assault, which really wasn't probably their best forte. The boats look like big shoe boxes. They have squared off ends on them. They were designed for stability in the water. They were never designed to cut through the water. So when you pack them with men, the gunwales of the boat were very close to the edge of the river. And so instead of slicing through the water, they literally plowed their way across the river. It was a tough haul for these men. It was very slow, and the entire way they would have been subject to gunfire. One Union soldier mused that it was probably the toughest regatta ever rowed in the Rappahannock.
What was the result of the urban warfare?
One of the amazing impacts of the fighting downtown is that the Confederates had so successfully delayed the Union Army that they crushed the Union commander's plans. He wasn't able to get his forces across the river and strike at the Confederates in a timely manner, and Robert E. Lee had more than enough time to bring his forces together and concentrate them, so that when the Union Army was ready to strike out from Fredericksburg, 78,000 Confederates had ringed him in and were waiting for him. The Confederates downtown had not only delayed the Union crossing, but they bought Lee the chance to concentrate his forces. According to General Robert E. Lee, everything that happened downtown won the Battle of Fredericksburg, and everything after that was a foregone conclusion.
Tactically, what we saw were lines of men moving down the street, firing, and the Confederates retreating. Is that the way it happened, or was it different than that?
There's a certain flair or element of it that does ring true. Union forces did march through the downtown streets. They did literally fire from the streets, but most of the Confederates were safely ensconced in among the houses and the rubble. Most of them had been here for about 2 weeks prior to the battle. They had already picked out the ideal spots where they could fire on the street. When a house fell, they were quick to move back to the next defensible position. So in this case, we see Union and Confederate soldiers firing in the streets. But in 1862, we would have seen a lot of Union soldiers in the streets, but most of the Confederates would have been hidden in among the houses and firing from the windows in the alleyways.
Here they are, boys. Come and get them. This battle flag means battle, boys. You can't talk your way out of this.
Second platoon.
Daryl and Bonnie Johnson from Midlothian, Virginia.
And why are you doing what you're doing here today?
We enjoy interpreting history.
And how do you determine how you're dressed?
We do a lot of research before we dress. We make sure that everything we have is period correct. It may not be original because you don't want to take anything original out, but we make sure that it is as close to what would have been in that particular period that we're dressed in.
Do you have anything to add to that?
A man never talks, he lets the woman do the talking for him, even during the Civil War.
Smart gentleman. As in 1860, as in 2012. Happy wife, happy life. This is my first street battle, and it's just absolutely wonderful. The historical places in Fredericksburg are just glorious. You get to, more as in a battle, you get to engage with the people that are on the street and answer a lot of questions. So that's it's a lot more fulfilling for us.
What kinds of things do people ask you?
A lot of times they'll ask you about your clothing. Not too many questions today about military things. We do have a lot of that. But a lot of times they'll ask where we live or what we did. If we lived in Fredericksburg at the time that it was occupied, what would we have done? A lot of women questions. People are very curious about how women survived during an occupied time, which was very hard for women.
So, from your research, what did the civilians do during this battle?
I'm not going to be able to tell you too much about this particular battle, but I can generically tell you what would have happened for another occupied city. Your women would have been the hardest hit. They would have been short of food. If they stayed, if they didn't refugee to an outside area, if they had family, they would have left. But if they were here, they would have done nursing. They would have taken soldiers into their homes. They would have, it's just been very hard. They would have had to figure out a way to survive without your men and in an occupied town, which was also very difficult. When you have soldiers, whether they are from the north or the south, soldiers are rough, and you have to be very careful as a woman alone how you're perceived or what you do.